Welcome to the Educating Mindfully Learncast, where we support mental health and well-being in education through mindfulness-based learning. Our Learncast is like a podcast, but with connected, reflective learning in our online community, which also has the opportunity for educators to earn professional development hours. This Learncast is a special experience for mindful educators and leaders to personally grow their practices within and beyond education as mindful global citizens. Before we begin, we invite you to pause where you are for an invitational intention. Perhaps placing your hands on your heart. And together we will take 4 collective breaths, 1 breath for each ripple within our framework's educational ecosystem. Breathing in first for ourselves, and exhale. Next, breathing in for our staff, and exhale. Then breathing in for our students, and exhale. And breathing in for society as a whole, including families and communities. And exhale. Consider pausing and committing to yourself a collective intention by saying, I am a mindful global citizen. We look forward to learning with you as we continue educating mindfully together. My name is Lindsey Frank, and on behalf of our leadership team, we thank you for being you. Our episodes are supported by our mindful partners. Consider becoming a mindful partner today to be featured on an upcoming Learncast episode. Learn more at educatingmindfully.org/partners. Welcome to the next episode of the Educating Mindfully Learncast titled Connected on Every Level, Building Connection for Students, Staff, and Communities. I am Lindsey Frank, the Educating Mindfully President, Director, and the host for today's episode, and I am here today with Erin Shook. Welcome, Erin!
Thank you, Lindsey.
Welcome. So Erin Shook is a high school teacher with over 17 years of experience, and she is passionate about creating supportive environments where students thrive academically and personally. She's known for her innovative teaching that combines psychology content with life skills. And like those skills with our self-awareness, our social connection, she also brings her perspective as a mom. And that's very important. She's been doing a lot of incredible work supporting communities with moms. She's a mom of 4, and she helps educators balance their career, family, and well-being. Erin is committed to promoting mental health and physical wellness for teachers and students alike. She fosters connection, self-awareness, and personal growth both inside the classroom and beyond. And she's also a member of our community and board member of Educating Mindfully. So thank you for connecting with us today, Erin.
I'm excited to be here.
So as we begin, I want to share with our mindful community a bit of background around our mindfulness-based learning framework and to really define mindful social connection for a shared context for our episode today. And as a reminder for our mindful listeners, our framework itself looks like an ecosystem. So we invite you to visit educatingmindfully.org/framework so that you can see a visual of what that ecosystem looks like. And within the ecosystem, there are 4 trees, and those trees represent the mindfulness-based learning skill progression that aligns and elevates social and emotional skill development. You can find a free download of our skill progression on our website as well. And One of those trees is mindful social connection, which is our focus for today's episode. Mindful social connection nurtures relationship skills and social awareness through having mindful self connection, which is one of our trees, mindful self regulation, and mindful decision making. All of those are trees that then lead to mindful social connection. And mindful social connection increases the capacity for our interconnection, our curiosity, and our compassion as what we call mindful global citizens. This extends beyond just the classroom and really allows us to tune inward of who we get to become in the world. And what we share in our mindfulness-based learning micro-credential program is essentially all mindfulness-based learning skills build to develop a mindful social connection. When we know ourselves, we can open our hearts to others genuinely. And this is why it is shown as that final tree when you look at the framework and read it from left to right. It's that final tree on that right to show that progression. And as I shared, you can learn more about our program and the framework at educatingmindfully.org. So just take a moment to set an intention for connecting to our topic of mindful social connection. And perhaps taking a collective breath in to connect all of us mindfully together. And a collective breath out to reaffirm the connection. And then let our hearts connect together as we engage in our conversation together today with Erin. So, in our framework, as I just shared, we all share how all of the components lead to mindful social connection. So, Erin, my question to kind of start us off is, why is mindful social connection important, and what makes it different than just having social awareness? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thank you for that question, Lindsey. I think so much, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes from I am a high school sociology and psychology teacher. So a lot of this stuff I feel very fortunate that I get to talk about and bring into my classroom curriculum. And so much of this question, I think, comes back to just as like human beings, we're wired to connect with one another. Um, and I'm going to really, really try not to go down any rabbit holes and stuff like this. But, in terms of like, just from an evolutionary standpoint, just, being in social groups with one another. And I think that, I'll talk about this more later, but we've kind of gotten away from that more, especially if we look at, our adolescent population. But there's such a huge predictor of happiness is directly tied to social connection with one another. So I know that's a huge thing I go into in our positive psychology unit about, ways to become happier that are within your control. There's just study after study about, when we can connect with other people in person, when we can do something nice for another person, it's this two-way benefit where we both feel happier after. So I think I just think mindful social connection on all levels. Again, I view a lot of this through the lens of like a high school and teenagers, but I think that it's so important because we're made to be socially connected, and it's a huge indicator of our overall happiness and well-being.
Yes, and you bring up the innate part of us that is wired for connection. And, in the world right now, we feel like we are connected through technology, yet the same thing is still so disconnecting at the same time. And I bet you've probably seen some different shifts even in your own classroom, especially being at that high school level. I don't know if you have any other insights to share about, how we could really cultivate that connection, even though there's all these distractions, even though we're in this world that seems to be disconnected.
Yeah, I think a huge thing. And I mean, we're starting to see so much more of this coming out in research studies and that. I think Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation kind of broke the internet and everything with that in terms of just the dangers. We really didn't know what we were doing essentially when we, gave all this technology to kids at a younger age. And I think that we're going to see kind of the pendulum. We've already started to see the pendulum swing back, with schools outlawing, phones and stuff and technology. And I've actually just in the past couple of weeks seen a few studies come out about just like computers and Chromebooks and stuff like that. So, trying to go tech free. So I think, when I think about one of like the easiest yet hardest ways to start promoting social connection is to get rid of technology. And that's been something that has been really important to me in my classroom, is to create a space where you don't have your phone. I know that phones are very much a school by school policy, but I'm fortunate at my school, we do have a policy where all phones are put up in their phone pockets. So that's not an issue. But even to go one step further, I feel like a lot of times I'm trying to go back in time to teach, like the 1990s, where you don't have everything, where kids aren't typing everything and on a Chromebook, and just the amount of screen time that adolescents have each day it's not good for their mental health, their physical health. And I think the more time we can put technology away and allow space, I think allowing time and space is such a huge thing to promote that social connection. All too often, again, I'm talking about the lens within schools, but all too often, we like expect stuff to organically happen among students. And I think if I've learned anything over the past, 5 years post COVID, is that kids need to kind of be retaught some of these social skills and that. And the best way to do that is to remove technology and forced sounds bad. Forced social connection doesn't sound, but just allowing opportunities in a space where I get out of the way and allow my students to interact with one another. A huge thing that I've used in my classroom, I call it screen-free time. So I will build in, here and there, like 25 minutes where, there's no screens. I have a whole bunch of games, puzzles, Play-Doh, coloring, and that kids can get out. And my only thing is that you can't be on a screen. So it forces them to find something to do. And many times they'll interact with one another in a way that they wouldn't have had they just been able to have their Chromebook and play, some online game, or their phone, or watch a movie or something like that. So that's been, I think I started that process about 3 years ago. And I've just kind of grown my game collection and grown my confidence in using it in the classroom. And it's something that is so fun as a teacher to just like sit back and watch, and it does get kind of loud and all of that sometimes, but it's fun because it's kids laughing and kids connecting with one another, where I feel like so much of that we've lost. But I'm hopeful, based on like what I've seen, that again, if we can do a better job of providing space and kind of sometimes modeling what mindful social connection looks like, that they will do it and they will enjoy it. So I'm positive in that. I'm not a thinker where the gloom doom post COVID. I definitely think we swung back from a couple years after with that, but I think that we'll see more and more of that increased connection among students.
Yeah. And, you know, even just with those games, all of those other trees that lead up to that mindful
Yeah.
social connection, right? Like we have to be connected with ourselves. So then that's that choice. Okay, what am I choosing to engage with that brings me that happiness and joy and something maybe different? And then that mindful self-regulation where if
Yes.
I'm engaging, I'm engaging in a way that's intentional and in a way that supports the relationship that's connecting with me to then move to the mindful decision making together, and then it moves to the social connection. So that's a beautiful way of how all those trees all lead us to mindful social connection. And I think the key word that you brought up was allow. It's not a force,
Yes.
it's an allowing. And also that time and space that you brought up, and when we can have the time and space and just allowing that to come through, that's when the relationships happen. And we know in from several of our other episodes coming back to relationships, how relationships are at the core. And so, when we don't have that strong connection and we don't have that strong relationship, then we don't have the strong lasting learning in our life, and then that ecosystem just isn't as healthy. So thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
small change.
And I would reiterate again, just to anybody that, is in the classroom. I think we're really quick to in elementary schools, everything's fun, it's, playful and stuff like that. And then something just happens where, once kids start getting into upper grades that we think they don't like to play anymore. And I think there's so much, again, I'm a huge anxious generation fan, but he talks a lot about that, how so much learning is done through play. And that is, I think apparent to us in the elementary level, but then we don't allow for that in the high school level. And I think that, if you are a high school teacher listening or work with adolescents, just creating the space for that, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised when you give kids the time and opportunity to do that. There's a lot, like you talked about, there's so many other like social emotional skills that are fostered through playing a game with another person or a group of people.
Yeah, and it's purposeful. And that's why we specifically label this not just self-awareness or self or social connection or social awareness. This is mindful, meaning there's intention behind it, there's a reason and purpose for it. And I did write an article fairly recently called The Heart of Connection, where there was like this continuum from what does that look like from that disconnection to connection. And so, yes, we need the social awareness to have an understanding of how we can create connection. But then if we just stay at awareness, we miss that whole other layer. So just even that you're mentioning this play, I love how this is like connecting here and how often, I mean, even if we think about this as listeners right now, like when was the last time you allowed yourself as a
Yes, yeah.
listener to enjoy something or play or just allow that time and space? So even just a pause here and just notice that. And even a pause here to notice when was the last time we offered that for our students, no matter what age they are. I think that really brings us to a really great next question about just creating those daily moments. Like, are there other opportunities, especially through the lens of your experience with teens, how we can create those daily moments for people to feel seen, to feel supported, and to really connect, especially when we are in this space of this loneliness and this anxious generation. Like what are some things that you can recommend?
Yeah, I keep going back and I love that you said about play for adults, which I know sounds, might sound kind of silly, but I think that's been something that I've kind of reflected on, more so lately because, as a parent and as a teacher, the responsibilities are high and the to-do list is, a lot, but like actually carving out time to have fun and, play with, my own kids or, students. I've talked about this before, and somebody asked, like, do you ever sit down and play like a game with the kids in the classroom? And I'm like, you know what? I don't. So I think there's so many opportunities, but to play. So I liked how you had time for us to kind of think about that, because I think that's a really powerful thing to think about, you know, as an adult, of like, where do you have, and I think when I hear the word play, it's like, it's joyful, it's silly, it's not necessarily tied to like having to check a box and get something done. So I think the more we can be intentional about carving out those moments, I can't sit here and say what that might look like for you. But, for me, actually, with my own kids, it was, a couple of weeks ago, my oldest son wanted me to play Operation with him, which, so, actually taking the time to sit there and play that game with him, I think so often, myself included, we're quick to think like, oh, this is going to take too much time, with this one. Really, it's it doesn't. So I think, just again, to bring back what you said, I think that's so important. As far as kind of just other sort of things within my classroom and just kind of larger community, I found, especially with teenagers, that if you give them kind of prompts to talk with, that helps kind of promote the connection. I think sometimes if you're just like, okay, here's 5 minutes to talk with my classroom, they're set up in groups, but 5 minutes to talk with your group, that doesn't always go so well. So I have all different things. I have these that I use. They're like Let's Mingle Kids Edition. So they're, those question cards or prompts. And what I'll have the kids do sometimes, just because I think sometimes doing is like, if you're doing something, it's less awkward than if you're, one-on-one facing each other. So we might like take a walk outside and they have some cards to discuss, or like yesterday I was, since it was the last day of our semester, asking them about what was an item on their Christmas list, and they had to mold it into with Play-Doh, and they had to make it, and like we had to try to guess, what was on their list and stuff like that. So I think just like, as far as having some guided questions sometimes is helpful with that, and then having some sort of like manipulative, or having them do something with it, whether it just be like walking around your classroom, or something that is better than just the one-on-one. Sometimes, at least with teenagers, that can feel kind of awkward at times for them. So
Yeah, there were a few things that you shared there. So one, I just want to mention for our listeners, we will definitely put these resources linked in the resources section. You mentioned about the checking a box, and I wanted to share, when we check a box, what do we feel? Right? Like, we actually, when we check that box, we feel this sense of release, relief, this joy, this happy. So we are naturally trying to feel that. So just validating that we don't have to wait for the check box.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait for the check box, and we can cultivate that. So, and that's for all of our ripples, right? Ourself, our staff, our students, and society. That's for everybody. You mentioned these prompts, and going back to how we're basically needing to relearn things. Like, if we were to not have that technology, it's like, how do we mindfully bring that in? Well, one way is now cultivating these opportunities for an organic connection, but can have the prompts along the way. And how do I engage in these conversations? How do I engage in ways that allow me to connect? And when I was a district-wide coach for social and emotional learning in our climate, even in our upper grades, I would find so often people would not even do circles. I was like, well, no, like a community circle is mindful social connection. And I feel like some of the things that you're mentioning here, even those prompts, like that could be something that for even just 5 minutes before class, connect together as a community, share your thoughts about that, and then see how the learning then shifts, see how the engagement shifts because we have that connection together. And then also, connecting with the students and say, like, how does this look even outside of the classroom? And I'd be
Mm.
curious if we even have like an informal survey with them, and before you were to shift a practice for the connection, ask them how connected do they feel together, and then maybe a month later give them that same question and see if there's a shift in there.
Like
So
that.
yeah.
Yeah. I start new classes with the semester, so maybe that's something that I'll have to do, like a pre and post survey. Because definitely with my sociology, I do a ton to promote, just the nature of the course,
Mhm.
but just a ton to promote that uh, connection within the class. And I think you point out too, yeah, it's such a better learning experience for everyone. You went back to the relationship piece earlier, but I mean that's like foundational of any good classroom. I mean, you have to have the kids bought in and connected with one another for sure.
Yeah. Well, and expanding even beyond our students, you were even sharing something before our episode today around some opportunities that you're even connecting with staff. Do you want to share like how you can, what are some ways that you're even allowing the space for staff or adults or families that you're supporting to start to cultivate that mindful social connection?
Yeah, that's been a huge piece, kind of, I think for me within the last year, and just focusing on my own story within education and looking at just kind of the balancing between parenting and, being a teacher, both being very demanding, high energy roles. And the work that I've done on myself, and when I focused on my own well-being, I just think that that is the single strongest thing for, being, um, I don't want to use the term good, but being able to like withstand the demands of both being a teacher and a parent, that you have to take care of your own well-being first. Which is why, that everything is so great through this program, and that because it ultimately is fostering that like adults who care about themselves are good for kids. And I think you can look at that from the lens of teaching, parenting. So yeah, I've done some stuff with a group of I did a group coaching program specifically with teacher moms, and focused on the challenges again that both roles bring. And that was super super rewarding. I'm gonna do another cohort. It is I think providing a space and just, to be seen, to be heard. And a lot of this stuff, that we know is good for us, it isn't like brand new, you've never heard of it before, but it's allowing like very busy people, which I think teacher parents are very busy people, allowing them a space to take time, to do this. So that was, we would meet for an hour each week, and just kind of going through the first step was, awareness of realizing, where are your kind of triggers for stress and burnout throughout your day as a teacher and parent. And then, rewiring or challenging those internal stories in your head. And then, as far as looking at your energy and looking at your schedule, and where can you, build time for yourself in the day, these kind of like micro moments to recharge. And again, I don't think anything that, I shared was like, groundbreaking, never heard of it before, but I think just like giving that time and space to be able to reflect. um, I think a lot of times educators are so focused on, getting things done, because that's the nature of the job. You have, X amount of time in a class period. You have learning standards and targets that you need to cover. You have an assessment that you need to give. And like, we don't stop and pause and just allow time sometimes to process our own, thoughts and feelings. So that's really powerful. And then within my school, myself and another teacher who's very into mindful education. She also teaches yoga and, very into mindfulness. And we started a Foundations of Wellbeing community of practice at our school, where we're meeting monthly. We have a different topic, and we meet for an hour after school. It's voluntary. And it's just been the impact, and the feedback we've gotten from, we're like a staff of 40, so we have like 8 people who have been regularly coming. And it just, again, same thing, just like so much appreciation for having the time, for feeling like they're not the only people who are feeling these things. And I think that again, it comes back to that, like creating a space for people to be seen and heard and connect with one another that are in a shared place in their life. And it's what's been cool with that for me is we have teachers that are coming that are, in their early 20s. This is their second year of teaching. And then we have people that are 3-4 years from retirement. And it's just like, what people are dealing with on any given day might be very different, but we're all in a role that we're expected to show up here, be our best selves, teach kids. And I think, yeah, it's so important to provide that space for this.
Yes, it reminds me, and when I was in that district role, we had the Morale and Mindfulness Committee. And so that
Okay.
was, it's very essential because it helps our morale and our climate within our schools and our learning communities. And then we also have that mindfulness side and that intentionality side and that well-being side. So it's amazing that you have this opportunity to be able to have that impact and be that space keeper. And for our listeners here, within our Educating Mindfully book, there are certain chapters that align with this kind of recommendation. And my chapter included, I believe, is chapter 34 about how to start that. So if that is something that you're interested in, we'll definitely put that in the resources as well. And I wanted to validate a couple different pieces. Having a community, that's why within our organization, we have our monthly community circle. So if you are looking for a community and maybe you don't have this kind of resource at your school yet, you are more than welcome to join us during our monthly community circles. You can find out more at educatingmindfully.org/circles. And also within our framework, Erin, you had mentioned like that one word, like you didn't want to mention the word good, but I want to say that word resilient. There's a
Mhm.
reason why we have in the ecosystem that this particular area is the tree, right?
Yeah.
And they are trees. They are resilient in the storm. They are resilient with the roots, and it continues to grow. And then that interconnection of all the roots that are underneath that then connect within the trees there too. So I wanted to name that as well
Yeah.
for our
Yeah.
listeners too, because that's really what's being developed when we have our mindful social connection is our resilience together in all
Definitely.
of this.
Yes. Yes.
Our forest of trees. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Any thoughts that are coming up for you? If not, I do have a couple more questions for our time here. Thoughts?
Um, no, I mean, yeah, the word resilience, I think, is so much of, yeah, what both those roles as parent and educator, you have to be. Not that you don't have to be resilient in any role, but I think especially when you're working and managing kids, I think that it's so important that we model that for kids, because um, if you look at, again, not to go down like the mental health trends with adolescents and stuff, but yeah, that's a huge missing piece right now. And the more that they can see adults who don't maybe have it all together, or they fall and they get back up, the better that is for kids.
Hmm. Uh, so again, a couple more shout outs here. One, our first episode was around presence and embodiment and how we move from that modeling into embodiment and seeing adults and seeing ourselves in that and fully embodying. So that is a recommended episode if you haven't had a chance to listen, as well as our episode for January around the well-being practices. And a lot of these um, resources and recommendations are continuously being validated. So it's wonderful when our LearnCast here can just be so supportive in so many different ways. And I was pulling because our question was around like some of the different strategies or moments. We do
Yeah.
also have our educator and leader embodiment cards, and so we have several that are the mindful social connection. And I'm even just thinking here, this one here that says about belonging. And I'm going to read that card just in case if anyone here would like to just pause for a moment. So the intention word is belonging. And the practice for the mindful social connection is tell your story. And then it goes. Each person has core moments, stories, and experiences that help shape who we are. Each person belongs. The invitation is to share a story in your life that brought you to where you are today. So maybe after this episode, think about who you can share the story with, because that creates the connection. And then afterward, just knowing that in here it says, your story matters, you matter, you belong. And then at the bottom of our cards, we reaffirm that it says, I am a mindful global citizen. And then thinking about how this practice and this area can be for ourselves, staff, students, and society. I just wanted to share that
Yeah, that's
card that
great.
came.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, just for another practice. But I know we have just a little bit more time together today, and is there? I'm wondering, because you also share about connecting and reconnecting with ourselves and how that allows us to show up with confidence in our classroom and at home. And I'm just curious if there are other ways that you nurture that self connection, and then how have you noticed that your self connection has made a difference for the social connection?
Yeah, I mean, so much of this comes back to, like you were talking about, the self-awareness piece. And you have to know yourself before you can, connect with other people. And I think when we look at educators, so many times it's a doing profession, as is parenting. And it's, I'm going to help you with what you need before truly looking at what I need. So I think, yeah, like you said, it really does start with the self-awareness that, I need to know what I need in my given day to make me feel good, to be able to show up as, a teacher and mom. For me, I know, like, that is starting my day, like, with a workout. I am far better, in all the roles I play if I, take the time for myself in the morning. And I think that's the biggest thing in just kind of working in this additional work I've done with parents and who are educators, is just don't be afraid. It's not wrong. You shouldn't feel guilty about focusing on yourself. Um, Take time, even if it's a small time in your day, even if it's, during your prep period, to just take 5 minutes and, like, to sit in silence and, have that time for yourself, or to take a walk during your lunch. I think we give. And if you look at burnout and the exhaustion within both of these roles, um, you know, as I said before, it's adults who care for themselves are good for kids. And I think that's what we have to put at the forefront of how well are you going to connect with other people if you don't first feel good yourself? You're really not. So taking the time to get to know yourself more and what you need is going to help then foster the social connection in your other areas of life.
Yeah, and the importance of, for our school leaders listening here, maybe thinking about how you can create an environment that allows for staff to be able to find those moments or and I don't know if Erin at your school does your admin or have you worked with other administrators or leaders because you've been working with a lot of different people even outside of your school, any recommendations to kind of help nurture those spaces or ideas for our leaders to help connect their staff further and the whole community?
Yeah, I mean, this was something we brought to our administration, myself, and the other teacher over the summer. And I mean, thankfully, I don't think anybody in administration, I mean, you can again look at any of the headlines and realize that, burnout and that is a problem within education. So thankfully they were very supportive and have given us, the time and resources to put this all together. So yeah, I think just, taking that first step of having that conversation and, like you mentioned, there's lots of other resources within the community that people who have done this, that people can, model after or pull from. But, yeah, just starting the conversation. I don't think that you're going to get a whole lot of pushback here because it is something that is so important.
And that is also why in our framework, we are all the ripples from ourselves, staff, students, and society, right? So that one conversation creates a ripple. And so may you as a listener today maybe feel that inspiration or notice what one action can be taken today and how can we continue to move from this doing profession to a being profession and whether our, and the different identities, right? If you are listening and you are in a parenting role, like how that can also become from a doing to a being.
Yeah.
I think this is a really great opportunity just to see if you had any other resources or strategies that you can recommend for just helping people to even advocate for having a strong social connection across the ripples. Or, I mean, we've shared quite a bit, but you might have just a couple more before we close today. Any other thoughts?
Um, I have, which I can include, I have some kind of some reflection guides that I've done with some groups and that I'm happy to share. Uh, Again, just from what I've seen, it's really you can have the source, but then the next step is you have to take the time to actually fill it out and think about that, which I think, like I said, I think just due to the busyness of everything, that's the part that when you do have, you know, time set aside, like with this community of practice we're doing at school, when you have time set aside as part of a meeting, you're more apt to actually answer those questions. And that's what, that's, I think, just you can have all the resources, but you have to carve the time out to actually do something with the resources.
Yes, action, action.
Yes, yes,
Nothing ever happens without action.
yes.
Well, and even just gratitude for those who are listening today, right? Like that is an action. You listening and carving out
For
time right
sure.
now for listening, that is an action. Perhaps when you receive the different kinds of reflections and the questions that Erin's able to share, that maybe that's something we're like, okay, maybe within our team meeting, we can make an agreement within our team to just start even just 3 minutes, even just 1 minute, like one question of connecting and just holding that as a team. Or if you are a leader right now, maybe it's something that you're also creating within your climate, just these little moments that then can build up over time the connection. Because if we are not connected, then we are disconnected, which means
Yes, yes.
what are we going to accomplish with disconnection? Nothing.
Right, right.
So So when we can have our mindful, intentional social connection, then we know that the rest of that ecosystem will continue to grow and thrive. So, for our members here, we will continue this conversation in our member online community. And each week this month, we'll post a reflection question. And by sharing your own insights and responding to a peers, you can earn professional development hours. So you can learn more about how all of that works on educatingmindfully.org/learncast. And we'll also release a companion voices blog, as well as a mindfulness-based learning lesson inspiration this month. And that will support you as you integrate nurturing the mindful social connection into your teaching and leading. So as we begin to close, we invite you to just pause for that moment and commit to one action. And we shared a few today. And just think about what is that action that you can take to extend this experience into your life. So just pause for a moment. You can also pause this Learncast at any time. And then just let that resonate on the heart, maybe breathing it in as that action as well, choosing to let that breath come in or choosing to let that intention be on the heart. And then thank you again for our listeners for connecting time together. And thank you especially for you, Erin, for sharing all of the amazing paths and conversation and strategies and connection today.
You're welcome. I enjoyed being here.
All right. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.
We hope this episode inspires you to take action as a mindful leader and educator. As we close, we invite you to pause where you are for an invitational breathing practice. Maybe placing one hand at your heart and/or one hand on your stomach. And together, we will take 4 collective breaths, integrating our learning, 1 breath for each ripple within our framework's educational ecosystem. First and foremost, breathing for ourselves. Inhale. Exhale. Next, breathing in for our staff. Inhale. Exhale. Third, breathing in for our students. Inhale. Sipping a little bit more air for our students. Exhale. And finally, breathing in for our worldwide community. Take the biggest inhale yet. Exhale. Consider pausing and committing a collective intention together by saying, we are mindful global citizens. We invite you to continue this conversation with us and our member online community. Learn more about our nonprofit's LearnCast membership and our mindfulness-based learning micro-credential program at www.educatingmindfully.org. My name is Dee DuBose, and on behalf of our leadership team, we thank you for learning with us as we collectively do our parts to make schools and Mother Earth better than we found it. Have a great day on purpose. Peace.